Hello and welcome to the very first video in our Google Ads Fundamentals series. Our Director of Marketing and Communications, Patience, big shout out, brought up the fact that we don't deal with the 101 version of Google Ads very well. We like to go straight at the ultra complex pro tips and hacks and tricks and updates and news and philosophy and all that good stuff, just because we're super nerds and we like to nerd out. But we haven't done a really good job bridging the gap for people that are brand new or just getting started or don't know as much, which is okay, by the way. That's perfectly fine. But we want to make sure that we're serving the entire breadth of our potential member base. And so in this particular video, I want to talk about the first question that might occur to anybody inside of this ecosystem, which is, what is Google Ads? What is Google Ads and how does it work? And so this will be something more of a basic conversation. If you're an advanced user and you already know, this isn't for you. Don't waste your time. Go watch something else, something more fun and engaging. But if you're not sure, and you're new to marketing, or maybe you're not new to marketing, you're just new to online marketing or digital marketing or Google specifically, hopefully this video starts to shed some light. So the first thing I'm going to do is you'll know over time if you engage with our content enough. I don't trust Google or Facebook or any of them. As a matter of fact, my course is called You versus Google, because I think generally speaking they don't have your best interest at heart. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to highlight what Google says Google Ads is, and then tell you what I think Google Ads is, because they're two mildly different things. There's some departures here. So if you go to ads.google.com, Google has some literature here that's worth paying attention to. And they have three primary call to actions that they speak to throughout their website: drive website visits, get phone calls, and increase visits to your store. So really what Google says Google is a marketing mechanism that helps you get more people onto your website, more relevant people on your website, or more potential customers to call you directly, or more people to go into your physical location. Now, right out of the gate, we have something of a, I think, misalignment in truth, because Google does not track things like in-store visits very well yet. They're getting a lot better. And they've actually recently rolled out some things and made some headway that's really exciting. But if you have a brick and mortar store, if you have a restaurant or a shoe store or whatever, if you have a physical location, driving traffic to your store, it's not impossible. It's available to you within the Google ecosystem, but it's not the type of thing that you can track with the same degree of efficacy that we can track everything else, like website visits or conversions or phone calls. So for Google to say like, hey, this is part of what we do, this is our core offering, I think is, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair to say, because we're talking about data-driven marketing, and to run data-driven marketing inside of a microcosm that doesn't allow you to access the data, well, we just lost, by definition, we lost some of those, the core capabilities there. I feel the same way about the call-only campaigns. Google, they love to prioritize the get more phone calls, especially for new and smaller advertisers. And, a lot of these advertisers are the people that are running around going, oh yeah, I tried Google, it didn't work. And it's because call-only campaigns, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different world than campaigns meant to drive phone calls, but through normal, more advanced conduits. So, in the world of what is Google, be really careful when they try to funnel you into specific kind of myopic marketing channels or views, because I think Google gets really powerful when you have the full breadth of tools available. The entire tool set is on your tool belt, and you feel comfortable using them all. But the minute you begin kind of taking their advice or walking through like their guided steps, or the Google for Dummies version, it puts you at a really distinct and significant disadvantage. So the first thing I'll say is that Google is a powerful marketing mechanism that requires a lot of time, effort, and energy to run and to manage. And what Google has done is they've tried to silo little teeny tiny functional pieces of that marketing mechanism and then sell them independently. But when you do that, it rarely works. And I can tell you that's true because I have a job. If it worked, I wouldn't have the position that I have in running Google Ads for people. Like, there's a reason people pay somebody else to do this, and that's because if it was as easy as telling Google, this is the geography I want, here's my credit card, go, then it would be far more effective, and you would have already heard about it from all of your friends and competitors, right? Like, people would be running those in perpetuity. So the very first thing to note is their articulation of what it is that they do, I think, is flawed. The other thing that I think is also really interesting is when you go to the How It Works section, Google focuses, their front-facing narrative is focused on search. So, and you're probably already familiar with this, but if you go to, let me open an incognito actually, so it doesn't do anything personalized. But I'll just say shoe store near me. If I go to Google and I search for something, and this is what I was afraid of, it's not giving me ads. We'll do, wow, look at that. I love some of the new UI. That's so interesting. Insurance company. There we go. So Google Ads, when people think of Google Ads, they're thinking of the ads that appear in a search. And you'll notice that there's 4 here on the 4-pack, and that's Google's limitation right now. They used to have way more. There were some on the right-hand column, and every now and again you'll get one in the maps, so you could think of that as a 5th ad, because it's showing up chronologically speaking as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all as ads. But you can spot the ads because they have this little ad tag next to them. However, Google's done a really good job of blending their ads into their organic search results. As a matter of fact, if you look at this and you look at this, they look pretty similar, with the exception of some mild font changes in this little ad tag. They used to be way different. They had a different color background and different manifestation in terms of the way that it was formatted. And then Google's really merged them. When you're on mobile, the ads specifically take up like the majority, and that's not going to work. Let's go do this. The ads take up way more of your real estate. And I'm not going to be able to show you really what we're talking about here, but if you can think about it, your smartphone would probably end like right around here, which is, a little frustrating, honestly, for a lot of us, because it means that the ads are swallowing up all of the real estate available to us. And it's the reason that we would, potentially want to run ads to get in front of consumers. But Google positioned themselves as a search engine, which is kind of true. It's kind of true. So if you think like, what is Google Ads? Most people say like, oh, it's where you go advertising on Google search. The problem with that is Google, from an infrastructure standpoint, Google is so much more than that. And that means that Google Ads is so much more than that. And I'm not just talking about where Google puts your ads. I'm talking about the tools that Google uses to acquire data in order to know who to deliver ads to. Because that's maybe one of the most important things for you to know. One of the most important things for you to know is Google isn't just segmenting people by, what they're searching for. They're segmenting you by over 70 million demographic and psychographic profiling factors that Google is collecting on every single human being on the planet. They're looking at things like, it gets so granular. They know what verbs and adjectives and adverbs appeal to you most. They know your favorite color. They know who your friends are. They know what your children look like. And they know this because, yes, Google search is very expansive, and everything that you search is cataloged against your individual profile. But remember, Google isn't just Google search. It's also Gmail, which is the largest email application on the planet. And they're reading every single email you send and receive, and they're cataloging that information against your user profile. And so really think about that. Think about everything you've ever said. Everything you've ever said inside of email, and what that means about you. Google knows where you're going, who your friends are, what events you're interested in, the things that you subscribe to, the things you unsubscribe from, your major life events. They know if somebody is going to get married or if somebody passes away. They know if you bought a new car. They know if you're interested in a new house. And you might think to yourself, well, I don't use Gmail. Yeah, but I bet you communicate with people that use Gmail. And bet money, Google's like, oh, I know their email address, and I know I've been able to connect them to a user ID in this way, and here's the email that they sent, and here's the email they received. So Google's Gmail, which is huge. Google's also YouTube, second largest search engine on the planet. So if you've ever engaged with YouTube, you're intrinsically qualifying yourself based off of certain interests. Google's also the entire Google Apps suite. So if you're using Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Presentations, Google knows the information. Google knows my taxes because I have all of that, hosted in a private Google Drive folder. Google Photos. I have an Android phone, and so when I take a picture of my kiddos, Google automatically backs that up to Google Photos. And what's crazy creepy is Google knows, I have 2 children, Google knows the difference between the two. They look more or less alike, but Google knows, hey, this is Ronan, this is Sammy. It has facial recognition software, and it can tell who is who, which means that it also knows who I'm hanging out with because it sees my photo alongside other people's photos, and it knows who some of those people are. And so Google has an intricate web of our network available to us. Google is also Android. So, if you're using an iPhone, you might be a little safe, but if you're using an Android phone, which I use, it's the largest operating system on the planet, which means Google knows who you text, who you call. It would stand to reason, although they deny it vehemently, that Google is listening to your calls. If you've ever had the experience to where you talk about something, don't search for it, don't message it, don't put it in writing at all, but then all of a sudden you start receiving ads about it, I'd ask you how that happens. And again, all the advertising networks swear up and down that they don't listen in, but I don't know how else that would work. Google is also the underlying foundation from a tracking perspective. I think Google Analytics is on like 99% of all websites or something. It's on all the most important ones for sure. So Google can see, because all these websites are adding Google snippet of code, through Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. Google can see what websites you go to, and it can see what you do on those sites. So, to get really uncomfortable for just a moment, imagine if you go to like an Alcoholics Anonymous website for that's something that's really private and personal and not something that you want to know. But if Alcoholics Anonymous has analytics on their site, Google's able to track that. Now, would they ever use that information? They'll say not, but now they know that about you, and they may know, demographically and psychographically speaking, a person who visits this website is more likely to engage in these behaviors. So, they might know like, hey, I'm actually not going to market these types of restaurants to this person because they're not going to go to a bar, but they'd be way more likely to go to brunch, for instance, because we've been able to match those behavioral components together. So if you think about the breadth and depth of information that Google has, Google Maps. Even if you're an iPhone user, you're probably using Google Maps or Waves, which I'm pretty sure Google just bought. That means Google knows where you go, how long it takes you to get there. So if, from point A to point B is supposed to take a half hour and you got there in 25 minutes, Google knows your speed. Google knows when you're running late to things. Google knows where you work, where you live, where you go for fun, when you're out of town, when you're traveling. And they use all of it. They use all of that information to build what they're calling audiences. So there's something called in-market audiences, which means these are people that are in the market to buy something. So I can go for in-market audiences, people that are from an automotive perspective or from a home furnishings perspective, or I can choose a bunch of in-market audiences and split them up categorically and say, hey Google, let me advertise to all the people that are interested in these products or services or whatever. There's also something called affinity audiences, which are just people generally interested in thematically speaking these things. So I can say, hey, show me all the equestrians or anybody who's interested in like nautical stuff or whatever. And I can adjust my advertising to target you not just based off of what you're searching, but also who you are demographically and psychographically, what you've done on various websites. And it's not just inside of Google Search. Google Search is the tip of the iceberg. Google has something called the Google Display Network. The Google Display Network reaches 90% of all internet users on the planet. 65% of those users are reached on a daily basis. And almost 70% of the top 200 websites feature the Google Display Network, which really means I think that number can be cascaded across because it's hard to rank websites. Most of the major websites that you visit are using the Google Display Network in some way if they have ads on them. So if you're scrolling around your favorite news site and you notice a bunch of ads being delivered, chances are those ads are coming from the Google Display Network, which means somebody's using Google Ads in order to deliver those ads. You also get ads inside of Gmail. You get ads inside of YouTube. You get ads across the entire Google ecosystem, and they're delivered to you. You're getting ads now in Google Images. They're delivered to you in a contextually appropriate way. So if somebody says, like, what is Google Ads? Google Ads is the advertising dashboard that allows you to push these advertisements in front of prospects based off of who they are, where they are, when they are in terms of the timeline for a purchase, if that's applicable, and do so in a contextually appropriate way based off of the placements that you choose. I mean, there's 4 dimensions of decisions to be made there and more. It's an exceptionally complex ecosystem, and it's worth understanding that you are the product. I heard it said once that anytime something is free, know that you're the product. Facebook is free. Most of Google is free. That's because you're the product. As you use it, it's productizing you and your attention. Google is day trading your attention to advertisers for money. And if you're in the advertising space, you get to use all of these tools. But you have to know how Google works in order to use it properly. So as far as what is Google, hopefully it does a mediocre job at least of kind of scratching the surface. Google Ads is the entire Google marketing and advertising ecosystem. And what's cool about Google Ads is you can use Google Ads to advertise inside of their display network, search, YouTube, specifically shopping. That's another thing I forgot. Google's the entire Google Shopping network, which I think 30% of all e-commerce purchases catalyzed by a Google search happen inside the Google Shopping network. It's huge. It's huge. And it has the ability to take on Amazon the way nobody else does. Not to say that they'll be able to beat them, but just to say that they'll give them a darn good run for their money for some time. And regardless of what you're selling or what you're doing, you can probably use Google to serve it. And that doesn't necessarily mean acquiring customers. Sometimes you might be priced out of the market from a customer acquisition standpoint, but you can do things like remarket to customers, or amplify the relationship you have with existing users and customers. So Google isn't just a customer acquisition strategy. Google Ads can also be retention, ascension, amplification. Like it really helps to push messaging in front of potential prospects, which, that's not just advertising, right? That's marketing and communications as a whole. So it's important for you to know that about Google Ads. And then as far as how it works, we've got a ton of videos. We've got a crash course on Google Ads that you can watch. Google has their own little note here, tell us your goal. What is it that you want us to be able to do? Decide where to advertise geographically, which, by the way, you can get really granular here as far as, you drop a pin and tell Google exactly where you want your ads to show up. Craft your messaging, and then tell Google how much you want to spend, and now we're advertising. And that's how easy Google says it is. You'll notice, though, that under advanced campaigns, they talk about, sales campaigns, driving leads, creating website traffic, building brand recognition, promoting specific apps. Oh, by the way, Google also has a massive, inside the Google Display Network, they have a massive network of advertisements that are being placed on side of mobile apps, which is really important for you to know. And they have a bunch of other types of campaigns. They have local campaigns, Google guarantees for specific industries. There's a lot that you can do here. So that's, if you're looking for what is Google Ads, that's more or less the answer. And then as far as how it works, I'm not going to go through the step-by-step because we have other videos, and I'll link to our Google Ads, sort of crash course in the description of this video. But I do want you to see one thing in particular. When I'm inside of Google Ads, and creating a Google Ads campaign is free, when I'm inside of Google Ads, Google will every step of the way try to funnel you into allowing Google to make the decisions on your behalf. So they're like, oh, hey, what's your goal? And if I select a goal, what's interesting is, and you won't know this, they don't tell you, but you lose functionality. So, if I say leads, then I'm going to lose e-commerce functionality. There's a lot of things become, not available and accessible to you. Certain bid strategies, attribution models, things that, and I guess, most of that is still available and accessible, but a lot of what you're able to do gets narrowed significantly. So you want to be real careful about choosing goals. However, here's what's frustrating is, let's say I didn't choose a goal. I'm also losing functionality then. And there's some things that aren't available and accessible to me. So if you're going to run Google Ads, it's important that you know what you're doing, or you work with somebody that does. And that's not a call to action to hire me, by the way. There's a lot of really good education out there. We've got an amazing course I'm really proud of. We have a ton of free content on our YouTube channel. There are a bunch of people out there that are producing really awesome, amazing content too. The two that come to mind, well, there's three that come to mind actually. There's Uzair over at SF Digital, who's a buddy of mine. Shout out to Uzair. There's a guy in the UK named The Big Marketer. I don't know his name, but he's awesome. And then there's Ed Leek, who founded God Tier Ads. And those three dudes are producing immense amounts of content that are either free or so cheap they should effectively be free. And if you want to learn Google Ads, that's where I would go. But in the what is Google Ads? Hopefully I've answered that more or less. And then the how it works discussion, it really depends on your goal. Are you an e-commerce store? And if so, what type of e-commerce store? Because if you're a consumable product and you have a really long, customer tail and high lifetime value, and people are always coming back, then you're going to run a way different type of Google Ad campaign than if you're a one and done, or if you're you're selling medical devices or whatever. Maybe you're a local brick and mortar. Maybe you're professional services. Maybe you're an affiliate or a reseller of some sort. It's really important that you don't take Google Ads education wholesale. Instead, try to contextualize the education based off of where you are and what you are doing. Learn from people that have already gotten to where you want to get from where you came from. They've traveled that whole spectrum of the journey. Just because they made a bunch of money doesn't mean that they made a bunch of money in a way that's accessible to you. It's really important that the education that you partake in is appropriate to what it is that you're doing. I think that's it. I think I'm going to end it there. And I hope that was helpful. I'd love your feedback. I'm trying to get better as a coach and a person. Just so everybody knows, I've got an anonymous survey that you can fill out. It's called slate.com/better. So if you go to slate.com/better, and I'll link to this in the description of this video, You can tell me one thing I did well, 3 things that I can improve upon, and then any other topics you're interested in learning in the future. This is completely anonymous. I won't know who you are. You're just going to help me get better as a person and as a coach. And I appreciate your time and attention. I hope this video was helpful to you and for you, and I've answered some questions. That's all I got. I'll see you tomorrow.